Little Jonathan's feet, little baby Tobro's feet. First thing we're looking for is how many toes? And we got 5 and 5, so that's a good start. We got 10 toes. Now the crazy thing about babies' feet, they're pretty much all cartilage. They're not really bones at all. Bones don't start forming till much, much later, maybe until they're mid-teens. So right now, he's got probably around 20, I think 20 something partially formed bones, and it actually increases to around 40 bones when they're in their, I'd say, late single digit age, and then they'll start to become hard and really form the full foot to have 26 bones when they're in, again, their mid-teens. So it's very normal for kids' feet to be full of padding and cushioning, super flexible. People are really worried, my kid has a flat foot, and that's actually completely normal at this age. So you can see there's not too much of an arch, but very soft. They're not walking, and that's okay. The most important part, what we want to see, is that the foot, when I hold it, is in a nice straight line, that it's not bowed or curled in, something like this. This is called something like a club foot, and that can cause some problems. So right now we can see when I put his ankle nice and straight, the foot's nice and straight, everything's nice and soft and flexible. That is a very important part. If the foot is too rigid at a baby's age, that could mean there could be some bone fusion. There's bones that are stuck together that are forming, or something's not right. The foot should be very flexible at a baby's age. You can see they react very well. They're very sensitive to touch. You can see his toes gripping the ground. And we want that foot to be nice and wide shape. We are mostly all born with this nice wide shape, and it's really shoes the majority of the time that will bind and change the way the foot works. So he's never really worn shoes yet, and we're really not going to put shoes on him for a very long time. What we want to do is socks, everything that's nice and wide, nothing that's too tight. We don't want to bind the foot. We want the foot to grow and be wide and allow it to expand. So looking, it's hard to see, I know he's moving a lot, but we got one long nail here, big toenail that I'm gonna try to trim today. What I found out, if you're ever gonna trim a baby's foot, give them some milk, let them pass out, because they wanna move around so much. It's so tricky to cut babies' nails, and they're so soft and fragile. So a lot of parents are always scared, how do I cut a baby's toenails when they're so thin and fragile? There's two ways. One is just trim a little bit of the extra length. We don't want to go too short. You can cut their skin, the nail can split, and the nail can go really short, and that's going to cause an ingrown. It's better to leave the nail slightly longer, and that way it's a safe thing to do. This nail is quite long, so we're going to trim that back. But one other little trick, we're telling them all the tricks, Jonathan, is that sometimes just filing the toenails with an emery board is much safer to do, because it reduces the risk of cutting them and hurting them, or causing the nail to split or break. So the big other thing when I'm looking at a baby, what's going on, is how are their hips? So as you can see, babies are born almost bow-legged. Everything's externally rotated, and that's good. That's normal. He's smiling so much. Let's take a quick look at him. Jonathan, you doing okay? You're good for your first video? Yeah, you're doing awesome. Great job. So this is the big thing that's completely normal, to see this hips wide, externally rotated, and as kids start to walk, we're going to notice that everything starts to internally rotate, and that's where we get a lot of kids who over-rotate and cause what we call in-toeing. And then as they get older, back teens up to the late teens, early adults, that's when everything externally rotates back into more of a straighter position. So it's very normal to see kids with this externally rotated bow-legged appearance. If it was the other way, that wouldn't be so good. That would be abnormal. So I know it's hard, he likes to move around, but we can see I can move the hips up. They want to move, there's nothing stiff. We have lots of rotation, so that's awesome. That's what we want to see. Ooh. Ooh. Is that nice? Yeah. You're getting a little stretch. Okay. So like I said, babies, very normal to be externally rotated, bow-legged, and when they start getting older, everything will rotate in, and we see sometimes a lot of over-rotation, internal rotation causing in-toeing, and then they'll kind of grow out of it in their late teens to be nice and straight. We got lots of videos with this guy to kind of discuss all the different stages of development, but right now what we want to see, bow-legged, externally rotated, flat, chubby feet, completely normal. All the toes in nice alignment. And we're gonna really just make sure that the footwear is never tight or squishing the foot. And we're not really binding the foot. Everything has to be nice and loose. Kids aren't walking at this age, so we don't really have to worry too much about really anything else. We get to just enjoy them being like cute and chubby. Very good. This is your first video. You're doing awesome. Good job, baby toe bro. Looking at his foot, you know, sometimes I notice, yeah, that second toe looks like it's going up, but that's pretty normal for now. As he starts walking, everything's gonna splay open. I know he wants to grip on really tight. And that's good. Kids' feet, chubby, flat. That is all normal, but they should be loose and flexible. Nothing should be stiff in the joints. And that's the main thing I'm looking at this stage. If the foot is stuck in a certain position and I can't put it to this neutral or flattened position, that's no good. So really not much for to check out on babies. He's got some toe jam already, toe bro. Baby toe bro, we're gonna get that out. You see the nails are slightly long on the big toe. And we're gonna take that down. Let's see this one. A little bit long. We'll trim it down a little bit. But they're very fragile. I honestly would say use caution, trim the nail and leave it a little bit longer is better than super short, because that can definitely cause ingrowns. Because their nails are so fragile, they can chip, they can crack, they can go back too far, and then the skin goes over, and that's where we have issues. So I'm gonna do a light little trim, or even just use an emery board to smooth it out.
So while I was trimming his toenails, I wasn't speaking because I was trying to keep Jonathan as asleep as possible. He was kind of in and out right now. So I blocked cutting the big toenail, but afterwards what I'm doing is filing any sharp edges with a nail file. Now, if you are on top of it, regularly filing their toenails with the nail file will maintain the length of the nail without any issues. Babies' toenails are so fragile, and sometimes if you trim too much at one time, or if you're using, let's say, a typical nail clipper, it can actually snap or crack the nail, and you end up leaving or creating a very short toenail. And that's where we can definitely get ingrown toenails. So the other smaller toes on this toe, I did not trim. I looked at the length of them, and honestly, just doing a little bit of filing is all we need. So here we are, trimming the toenail, the big toenail on this one, and I'm using my Tobro nail nippers. And the reason why I feel is I can get much better control. So I've actually put this video in slow-mo so we can see a little bit better, and I'm just trimming just a little bit of the nail. I am not trying to trim the nail short. I'm just trying to get some of that little extra length off, but still leaving a white line across. The biggest mistake that I get, or I see that when toddlers do come in, is parents trimmed too much of the nail, or the nail split or cracked because they cut too much of the nail at one time using a typical nail nipper. And that definitely can happen. So first off, try to trim their toenails when they're asleep so they're not fighting you or moving you. Now, if you're going to use a traditional nail clipper, trim a little bit of the nail at a time. You do not want to take too much of a big bite, because that could split or crack the nail and you'll be left with an extremely short nail, and that's where you could potentially get ingrown toenails. All we want to do is trim just a little bit of that white length down, just so, you know, they're not cutting you, the parent, or they're not getting irritation in the socks. And how we really touch up the rest is using an emery board, a nail file. So I'm looking at his other toes, and I notice that the third one's a little bit longer. And so as you're going to see, all I'm going to do is just a little bit at a time. It's so much easier when they're asleep because you avoid cutting them. They're not moving, they're not fighting you. And I'm not taking big chunks. I'm just trying to take a little bit length off, and I'm going to follow up using the nail file. I heard that myth again, biting toenails. I was thinking about it, but you really need to have a super long toenail to have enough to actually bite down. And I don't know if biting it would actually get rid of that toenail length properly. So again, this was my first time cutting a baby's toenail, and it was definitely nerve-wracking. So I find doing it while they're asleep, doing a little bit at a time, and use that emery boards to try to take some of that extra length and smooth out the nail edges, and you're going to be A-okay.